Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Perfect Facade. Martin Porter stood in his mahogany-paneled office on the 42nd floor, watching the city sprawl beneath him like a conquered territory. At 52, he commanded respect through calculated silence and devastating precision. His construction empire had risen from nothing, built on the graves of competitors who underestimated the steel behind his measured words. "Mr. Porter, your wife called," his secretary announced through the intercom. "Dinner at 8. Martin's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Jennifer had been distant lately, her rehearsed smiles feeling hollow during their public appearances. 23 years of marriage had taught him to read the subtle shifts in her behavior. The way she now checked her phone obsessively, the mysterious charity meetings that ran late into the evening, the sudden interest in yoga classes that somehow never improved her flexibility. He'd built his fortune by trusting his instincts, and those same instincts now whispered warnings he wasn't ready to acknowledge. The drive home to their Westchester estate felt longer than usual. Jennifer's silver Mercedes sat in the circular driveway, positioned at an odd angle as if she'd rushed inside. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, he could see her pacing in the living room, phone pressed to her ear, speaking in animated whispers. "Martin," she brightened artificially when he entered, clicking off the call with suspicious haste. "You're early. I was just talking to Katie Watson. You remember, from the country club? Her daughter's getting married next month." Martin studied his wife's face, the perfectly applied makeup that couldn't quite hide the tension around her eyes, the way her hand trembled slightly as she reached for her wine glass. Jennifer Harris had been stunning when they met, a 25-year-old real estate agent with ambition that matched his own. Now, at 48, she maintained her beauty through expensive treatments and designer clothes. But something fundamental had shifted. "How was your day?" he asked, settling into his leather chair. "Oh, the usual. Lunch with Kelly, then that new yoga instructor, Blake Clark. He's quite good, very hands-on with his teaching method." A pink flush crept up her neck as she spoke the name. Martin filed the information away. Blake Clark. He'd heard the name before, usually accompanied by Jennifer's breathless descriptions of breakthrough poses and spiritual alignment. For a woman who'd never shown interest in fitness beyond maintaining her appearance, this sudden devotion to yoga struck him as peculiar. Their daughter Nicole McPherson, Martin's child from his first marriage, had warned him months ago about Jennifer's behavior. At 28, Nicole possessed her father's sharp instincts and had never fully trusted her stepmother's motivations. "Dad, she's different lately," Nicole had said during their last lunch meeting. "Secretive. And that yoga instructor she talks about constantly. I looked him up. He's got quite a reputation with married women." Martin had dismissed it then, confident in his ability to control his environment. Now, watching Jennifer's nervous energy as she chattered about trivial social events, he wondered if his legendary strategic mind had a blind spot shaped like love. After dinner, Jennifer retreated to her bathroom for what she called her evening routine, a process that now included lengthy phone calls conducted in hushed tones behind locked doors. Martin sat in his study, reviewing contracts and blueprints, but his mind kept returning to Blake Clark. Eugene Doherty, his oldest friend and business partner, had served 2 tours in Afghanistan before joining Martin's company. Eugene understood loyalty, betrayal, and the price of both. Tomorrow, Martin decided, he'd have a conversation with Eugene about conducting some discreet research. As midnight approached, Martin heard Jennifer's footsteps in the hallway, followed by the soft click of their bedroom door. When he finally joined her an hour later, she lay on her side, breathing in the shallow rhythm of someone pretending to sleep. Martin stared at the ceiling, his mind already working through possibilities and contingencies. In business, he'd learned that betrayal was inevitable. The key was being prepared when it revealed itself. He'd destroyed companies and buried careers of those who dared cross him, but he'd never imagined needing those skills in his own home. The woman beside him shifted restlessly, murmuring a name in her sleep that wasn't his. Chapter 2. The Warning. Saturday morning brought the familiar ritual of grocery shopping at Westfield Market, the upscale store where Jennifer insisted they maintain appearances among Westchester's elite families. Martin pushed the cart while Jennifer selected organic produce with theatrical care, greeting fellow customers with the practiced warmth of a politician's wife. Katie Watson stood behind register 3, a 24-year-old college student who'd worked at the store for over 2 years. Martin had noticed her before, observant eyes that missed nothing, quiet efficiency that spoke of intelligence beyond her station. Today, she seemed unusually tense as they approached her lane. "Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Porter," Katie said, beginning to scan their items with mechanical precision. Jennifer launched into animated chatter about the weather, the country club's upcoming charity auction, and her new yoga regimen. "Blake is absolutely transformational," she gushed, apparently unaware of how her voice changed when she spoke his name. "He's helping me find balance in ways I never imagined possible." Martin watched Katie's reaction, a barely perceptible tightening around her eyes, a subtle pause in her scanning rhythm. The girl knew something. As Jennifer excused herself to grab forgotten wine from aisle 7, Katie's movements became deliberately slow. She glanced around nervously, then pulled a small piece of paper from beneath her register and placed it under a bag of apples. When Jennifer returned, chattering about Chardonnay versus Pinot Grigio, Katie completed the transaction with professional efficiency. As Martin lifted the grocery bags, he palmed the hidden note with the practiced smoothness of someone accustomed to discreet business dealings. "I'm going to check the deli for that prosciutto you mentioned," Martin told Jennifer. "Meet me at the car." In the relative privacy of the deli section, Martin unfolded the paper. Katie's handwriting was clear and urgent. "You're in serious danger. Don't trust her." His blood turned to ice. The simple words confirmed what his instincts had been screaming for weeks. But how did a 24-year-old grocery clerk know about his private life? Martin found Katie restocking items in the produce section during her break. She looked up nervously as he approached. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "What do you know?" Katie glanced around to ensure they were alone. "Mr. Porter, I live in the apartment complex on Maple Street. Building C, Unit 23. Blake Clark lives in Unit 27. She paused, gathering courage. "I've seen your wife there. Multiple times. Thursday afternoons, usually around 2 o'clock. They don't exactly try to hide it." Martin's face remained impassive, but internally, everything crystallized with brutal clarity. "How long?" "At least 4 months that I know of. Mr. Porter, there's more. Blake, he films things. I've seen him bragging to friends about his collection. He's not just sleeping with your wife, he's documenting it." The implications hit Martin like physical blows. Blackmail, humiliation, strategic leverage turned against him by a yoga instructor and his own wife. "Why tell me?" Martin asked. Katie's eyes reflected genuine concern. "My dad died when I was 16. Lung cancer. My mom remarried a year later to someone who seemed nice, but he was already cheating on her before the wedding. She found out through bank statements and credit card bills, but by then he'd convinced her family that she was paranoid and unstable. It destroyed her. I won't watch someone else get blindsided like that, especially not by people who think they're too clever to get caught." Martin studied the young woman's face, seeing steel beneath her quiet demeanor. In different circumstances, he'd have hired her immediately. "Thank you," he said simply. "This conversation never happened." Katie nodded. "Good luck, Mr. Porter. Be careful." As Martin walked back toward the store's entrance, his mind shifted into the tactical mode that had made him a legend in business. Jennifer stood by their car, checking her phone with the anxious energy of someone expecting important communication. "Any luck with the prosciutto?" she asked brightly. "They were out," Martin replied, studying his wife's face with new eyes. Every gesture, every expression now seemed calculated and false. The drive home passed in relative silence, Jennifer humming absently while texting. When she excused herself for a sudden yoga session that evening, Martin knew exactly where she was going. For the first time in 23 years of marriage, Martin Porter felt like prey instead of predator. But predators, he'd learned long ago, were most dangerous when they didn't realize they'd been spotted by a more skilled hunter. Chapter 3: Confirmation and Planning. Sunday morning brought Jennifer's announcement that she'd be spending the afternoon at her sister Kelly Rivera's house, helping plan Kelly's upcoming move to California. Martin had met Kelly enough times to recognize her as Jennifer's enabler, the kind of woman who considered marriage vows suggestions rather than sacred promises. "Take your time," Martin said, watching Jennifer's poorly concealed relief. "I have some paperwork to catch up on anyway." After Jennifer left, Martin made 2 phone calls. The first was to Eugene Doherty. "I need you to do something for me," Martin said without preamble. Quietly, Eugene arrived within the hour, his military bearing unchanged despite 15 years in civilian life. At 55, he remained lean and dangerous, with the patient eyes of someone who'd learned to wait for the perfect moment to strike. "What's the situation?" Eugene asked, settling into Martin's study. Martin handed over Katie Watson's note and explained what he'd learned. Eugene listened without interruption, his expression growing progressively darker. "You want surveillance?" Eugene asked finally. "I want proof. Video, audio, whatever you can get. And I want to know everything about Blake Clark, his background, his methods, his weaknesses." Eugene nodded grimly. "I still have contacts who specialize in this kind of work. Give me 48 hours. The second call was to his lawyer, Tim Ward, interrupting Ward's family brunch with the kind of urgency that commanded immediate attention. "Tim, I need you to review our prenuptial agreement. Every clause, every loophole. And I want you to start preparing documentation for asset protection, quietly." "Martin, what's going on?" "Just preparation. You've always told me that good lawyers win cases before they're filed." By Tuesday morning, Eugene had returned with a thick folder and a grim expression. Blake Clark, 32 years old, originally from Phoenix. He's been running this scam for years. Target wealthy married women, seduce them, collect compromising material, then either blackmail the husband or convince the wife to finance his lifestyle. He's done it in 4 different cities. Martin studied the surveillance photos. Jennifer entering Blake's apartment at 2:15 p.m., leaving disheveled at 4:30 p.m., both of them clearly comfortable with their routine. "There's more," Eugene continued. "He's got a partner, some guy named Jesse Moreno who handles the technical side. Hidden cameras, audio equipment, secure storage. They've got enough material on Jennifer to destroy both of you publicly." The audio recordings were worse than the photos. Jennifer's voice, breathless with passion and contempt. Martin's so predictable. He works late, comes home tired, falls asleep watching the news. "Blake, you make me feel alive again. When this is over, we'll have enough of his money to disappear anywhere we want." Blake's response chilled Martin to the bone. The beauty is, he'll never see it coming. By the time we're finished, he'll be so destroyed publicly and financially that he'll be grateful just to avoid criminal charges. Martin set down the headphones with deliberate calm. "They're planning to frame me for something." Eugene nodded. "Moreno's got connections to some very creative accountants. My source thinks they're planning to manufacture evidence of money laundering through your construction contracts. Once they've got you facing federal charges, Jennifer divorces you, claims she had no knowledge of your criminal activities, and walks away with half of everything while you're fighting for your freedom." The elegant simplicity of it impressed Martin despite his fury. Use his wife's intimate knowledge of his business operations to construct a believable frame job, then let the legal system do their dirty work while they disappeared with his fortune. "How long do we have?" Martin asked. Based on their conversations, they're moving fast. Maybe 2 weeks before they spring whatever trap they've set. Martin walked to his office window, looking out at the empire he'd built through ruthless intelligence and absolute loyalty. Every major decision of his adult life had been calculated to increase his power and control. Now, the 2 people closest to him were preparing to destroy him using the very systems he'd mastered. "Eugene, I want you to reach out to Reginald Pitts." Eugene raised an eyebrow. Pitts was a former Special Forces operator who transitioned into private security work that existed in the gray areas between legal and necessary. "You're sure about this path?" Eugene asked. "Once we bring Pitts into it, there's no going back to civilized solutions." Martin turned from the window, his eyes holding the cold calculation that had made him legendary in business negotiations. "They made their choice when they decided to betray me. Jennifer had everything she could want: luxury, status, freedom to pursue her interests. Instead, she chose treachery. Blake thinks he can use a woman's emotions to destroy a man's life's work. They're both about to learn that some people fight back. What's the plan?" Martin smiled, and Eugene recognized the expression from their early business days when Martin had systematically destroyed a competitor who tried to steal a major contract through bribery. "We're going to give them exactly what they want, and make them pay a price they never imagined. Jennifer wants excitement and passion. Blake wants to humiliate successful men. They're about to get both, along with consequences that will follow them for the rest of their lives." Eugene stood to leave, then paused. "What about Nicole? She should know what's coming." Nicole will understand. She's always known that loyalty is rewarded and betrayal is punished. It's time for Jennifer and Blake to learn the same lesson. As Eugene left to contact Pitts, Martin returned to his desk and pulled out a legal pad. At the top, he wrote two names, Jennifer Harris Porter and Blake Clark. Below them, he began outlining a strategy that would systematically destroy every aspect of their lives while ensuring they understood exactly why it was happening. In business, Martin had learned that the most effective revenge was the kind that left your enemies wishing they'd never been born. Jennifer and Blake were about to discover just how creative a truly ruthless man could become when stripped of sentiment and driven by pure, calculated rage. Chapter 4. The Hunter Becomes the Hunted. Thursday evening brought an unexpected invitation. Jennifer announced that Blake would be joining them for dinner to discuss a business opportunity. The audacity of it impressed Martin even as it confirmed their complete contempt for him. Blake's thinking of opening his own studio, Jennifer explained, her voice bright with false enthusiasm. I thought you might be interested in the real estate investment potential. Martin agreed with the measured calm that had terrified business rivals for decades. He'd always believed that enemies revealed themselves most completely when they thought they were winning. Blake Clark arrived at 7 sharp, displaying the predatory confidence of a man who believed himself untouchable. Tall and athletic, with the kind of sculpted features that attracted bored housewives, he carried himself with an arrogance that made Martin's fingers itch for violence. Mr. Porter, such an honor, Blake said, extending his hand with theatrical sincerity. Jennifer speaks of you constantly. I'm sure she does, Martin replied, noting how Blake's grip lingered just long enough to establish dominance. Jennifer tells me you're quite hands-on with your instruction methods. Blake's smile widened. I believe in personal attention. Every student has unique needs that require individual focus. Throughout dinner, Martin watched his wife and her lover perform their charade with practiced ease. Jennifer played the supportive wife promoting a friend's business venture, while Blake positioned himself as the grateful yoga instructor seeking guidance from a successful entrepreneur. Their shared glances and subtle touches revealed the truth beneath their performance. The studio space I'm considering is quite expensive, Blake said over dessert. But Jennifer assures me you understand the value of strategic investments. Strategic investments require thorough due diligence, Martin replied. I'd need to examine all aspects of the business plan, financial projections, operating costs, potential liabilities. Blake leaned forward eagerly. I have complete documentation. Perhaps we could meet privately to discuss the details? I'd hate to bore Jennifer with mundane business matters. Excellent suggestion. My office, tomorrow at 2 o'clock. After Blake left, Jennifer's excitement was palpable. Isn't he wonderful? So passionate about his work, so committed to helping people transform their lives. Transformation, Martin mused. Yes, I can see why that would appeal to you. Meanwhile, Reginald Pitts had begun his own transformation of Blake Clark's life. Eugene's former Special Forces contact specialized in psychological warfare that left no fingerprints and no evidence, just a growing sense of paranoia and helplessness in his targets. Blake's apartment building experienced a series of minor inconveniences. His mail delivery became sporadic. His internet connection suffered mysterious outages. His car developed electrical problems that mechanics couldn't quite diagnose. None of it was serious enough to report, but the cumulative effect was a constant, low-level stress that began wearing on Blake's confidence. Friday's meeting in Martin's office began exactly as planned. Blake arrived with a leather portfolio containing glossy brochures and financial projections that looked professionally prepared. Impressive presentation, Martin said after reviewing the materials. Tell me, Blake, what makes you confident this venture will succeed where so many others fail? Blake leaned back in his chair, completely at ease. Experience, Mr. Porter. I understand what wealthy women want. Attention, excitement, the feeling that they're truly alive. Once you give them that, they'll pay almost anything to keep it. And their husbands? Blake's smile turned predatory. Most husbands are too comfortable, too trusting. They assume their wives' loyalty is permanent, that their own success guarantees happiness at home. It's amazing how blind successful men can become to what's happening in their own bedrooms. Martin nodded thoughtfully. Interesting perspective. You must have considerable experience with married women. More than you might imagine. I've learned that the wives of powerful men are often the most desperate for authentic connection. They're surrounded by luxury, but starved for passion. Like Jennifer. The words hung in the air like a blade. Blake's confidence flickered momentarily before reasserting itself. Jennifer's a wonderful woman, Blake said carefully. Very committed to her yoga practice. Among other things, I'm sure. Martin's voice remained conversational, but his eyes had gone flat and cold. Tell me, Blake, in your experience with married women, how often do their husbands remain oblivious to the situation? Blake's jaw tightened. I'm not sure what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating directly that you're fucking my wife, filming it, and planning to use the evidence to destroy me financially and legally. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. Blake's face went pale, then flushed with angry defiance. You can't prove anything. Martin opened his desk drawer and withdrew a manila envelope. Audio recordings of your conversations with Jennifer. Video surveillance of your afternoon meetings. Financial records of your previous scams in Phoenix, Denver, Atlanta, and Miami. Names and contact information for your previous victims. And most interesting of all, documentation of Jesse Moreno's plan to plant fabricated evidence of money laundering in my business accounts. Blake's bravado crumbled completely. What do you want? Right now? Nothing. You're going to continue your relationship with Jennifer exactly as before. You're going to proceed with whatever timeline you've established for your little frame job. The only difference is that now I know everything you're planning to do before you do it. Why? Martin's smile was arctic. Because the best revenge is the kind that builds slowly, methodically, until your enemies realize they've been digging their own graves. You and Jennifer want to play games with a man's life and livelihood? Excellent. Let's play. Blake stumbled from the office like a man walking to his execution. Within hours, Pitts reported that Blake had contacted both Jennifer and Jesse Moreno with increasingly panicked phone calls. That evening, Jennifer seemed unusually tense at dinner. How did your meeting with Blake go? She asked with forced casualness. Very illuminating, Martin replied. He's exactly the kind of man I expected. Jennifer's phone buzzed constantly throughout the meal. Each message seemed to increase her anxiety, though she tried to hide it behind bright chatter about trivial social events. After Jennifer retreated to her bathroom for another of her lengthy routines, Martin's own phone rang. Nicole's name appeared on the screen. Dad, we need to talk, his daughter said without preamble. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? Early, before Jennifer wakes up. What's wrong? I've been doing some digging of my own. There are things about Jennifer's family you need to know. Things that might explain why she's so willing to betray you. Martin closed his eyes. How bad? Bad enough that you're going to wish you'd listened to me years ago. Meet me at that diner on Route 9, 7 a.m. sharp. As Martin ended the call, he realized that Jennifer's betrayal might be just the surface of something much deeper and more dangerous. The game he'd thought they were playing might have rules he didn't understand yet. But by tomorrow night, he intended to understand everything. And then the real destruction would begin. Chapter 5. Family Secrets and Strategic Alliances. The Route 9 diner squatted beside the highway like a forgotten relic, its neon sign flickering weakly in the pre-dawn darkness. Martin arrived at 6:50, his internal clock still operating with military precision despite the chaos consuming his personal life. Nicole sat in a corner booth, her laptop open and manila folders spread across the scarred Formica table. At 28, Nicole McPherson had inherited her father's ruthless intelligence and her late mother's intuitive understanding of human nature. Her marriage to Carlos Potts, a federal prosecutor, had given her access to investigative resources that most private citizens could never access. Dad, sit down, Nicole said without looking up from her screen. What I'm about to show you changes everything you think you know about Jennifer. Martin slid into the booth opposite his daughter, noting the grim set of her jaw. Nicole had always possessed an uncanny ability to see through deception, a trait that had made her skeptical of Jennifer from their first meeting. Jennifer Harris never existed before she met you, Nicole began, pulling up a series of documents on her laptop. Her real name is Jennifer Lynn Rivera. She and Kelly aren't sisters. They're partners in a long-term con operation that's been running for over 20 years. Martin stared at the screen, seeing birth certificates, court records, and newspaper clippings that painted a picture of systematic fraud stretching across multiple states. They work as a team, Nicole continued. Jennifer targets wealthy, recently divorced men while they're emotionally vulnerable. Kelly provides backup, creating false references and social connections. They establish long-term relationships, gain access to financial information, then execute elaborate schemes to transfer assets before disappearing. You're telling me our entire marriage was a setup? Nicole's expression softened slightly. Dad, you were perfect prey. Recently divorced, building a successful business, lonely enough to mistake Jennifer's calculated attention for genuine affection. They probably researched you for months before Jennifer accidentally encountered you at that real estate conference. Martin remembered that night 23 years ago, Jennifer spilling wine on his suit jacket, her apologetic laughter, the way she'd seemed genuinely embarrassed by her clumsiness. Even then, he'd been impressed by how quickly she'd assessed his financial status and relationship potential. What about Blake Clark? Blake's new to their operation, but he fits their pattern. They recruit young, attractive men to serve as both additional income sources and insurance policies. If a Mark becomes suspicious of Jennifer's behavior, the affair provides plausible explanation for any irregularities while positioning Jennifer as the wrong party in divorce proceedings. Nicole pulled out a thick folder. Carlos helped me access federal databases. Jennifer and Kelly have been running variations of this scam since they were teenagers. Their first known victim was a 60-year-old widower in Tampa who lost his entire retirement fund. He committed suicide rather than face bankruptcy. The revelation hit Martin like a physical blow. How many others? At least 12 that we can confirm. The Rivera sisters are responsible for destroyed lives, broken families, and financial ruin stretching across 2 decades. They're sociopaths, Dad, and they're very good at what they do. Martin studied the photographs of previous victims, men who trusted completely and lost everything. Some had rebuilt their lives. Others had simply disappeared from public records entirely. There's more, Nicole said quietly. Jennifer's pregnant. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Martin felt the world tilt sideways, reality reshaping itself around this new information. How do you know? I've been tracking her movements, her purchases, her medical appointments. She saw Dr. Sandra Mills 3 times in the past month. Mills specializes in high-risk pregnancies for women over 40. Jennifer's been taking prenatal vitamins and avoiding alcohol, though she's been careful to hide both behaviors from you. Martin's mind raced through implications. A pregnancy would complicate divorce proceedings, provide Jennifer with additional leverage, and potentially trap him in a web of legal obligations that could last decades. Whose baby? He asked, though he already suspected the answer. Based on timing, it's almost certainly Blake's. But here's where it gets diabolical. Jennifer's planning to claim it's yours. A DNA test would reveal the truth, but by then she'll have used the pregnancy to extract maximum financial advantage from the divorce proceedings. Nicole leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. Dad, they're not just planning to rob you. They're planning to destroy you so completely that you'll never recover. The money laundering frame-up is just phase 1. Phase 2 involves Jennifer claiming domestic abuse, using the pregnancy to generate sympathy, and positioning herself as a helpless victim of your criminal behavior. They want your freedom, your fortune, and your reputation. Martin sat in silence, processing 23 years of deception with the cold analysis that had made him successful in business. Every memory now carried dual meaning. Jennifer's reluctance to have children early in their marriage, her insistence on maintaining separate financial accounts, her careful cultivation of friendships with wives of potential future Marks. What do you recommend? He asked finally. Nicole's smile was sharp as a blade. We destroy them first. Completely. Permanently. She pulled out a final folder. Carlos has contacts in federal law enforcement who've been tracking interstate fraud operations. If we provide them with enough evidence to build a RICO case, Jennifer and Kelly could face decades in federal prison. Blake and Jesse would be swept up as accomplices. That's not enough, Martin said quietly. Prison is temporary. They'd eventually get out, change their names, start over. I want them broken beyond any possibility of recovery. Nicole nodded as if she'd expected this response. Then we use their own methods against them. We make them believe they're winning right up until the moment we reveal how completely they've been defeated. Martin's phone buzzed with a text from Eugene. Pitts has interesting news. Emergency meeting at your office in 1 hour. As they left the diner, Nicole placed her hand on her father's arm. Dad, I know this is devastating, but you need to understand. Everything Jennifer ever said to you, every gesture of affection, every moment of apparent intimacy was calculated manipulation. She's incapable of genuine human connection. Martin looked at his daughter, the one person whose loyalty had never wavered, whose love had never come with conditions or hidden agendas. Nicole, I want you to distance yourself from this situation. Whatever's about to happen, I need you protected. Absolutely not. She played games with my family. She made my father into a victim. That ends now. The drive back to Martin's office felt like preparation for war. By noon, he'd have all the information necessary to begin systematic destruction of the people who'd spent decades destroying others. Jennifer Harris Rivera had chosen the wrong target for her final con. She was about to learn that some men fought back with resources and ruthlessness that sociopaths couldn't comprehend. The hunt was about to become an execution. Chapter 6. The Trap Springs. Eugene and Reginald Pitts waited in Martin's office conference room, their faces grim with the kind of news that changed everything. Spread across the mahogany table were photographs, documents, and surveillance equipment that painted a picture of immediate danger. They've accelerated their timeline, Eugene reported without preamble. Jesse Moreno planted the fabricated evidence in your business accounts this morning. Jennifer's planning to file divorce papers tomorrow, claiming she discovered your criminal activities and fears for her safety. Pitts, a lean man with predatory eyes, slid a digital tablet across the table. Blake's been recording conversations with Jennifer for weeks, building a narrative that you've become increasingly volatile and controlling. They've got audio of Jennifer claiming you threatened her physically. Martin listened to his wife's voice describing incidents that had never happened, painting him as an abusive husband whose business success masked underlying criminal behavior. Her performance was Oscar-worthy, genuine fear mixed with reluctant loyalty, exactly the kind of testimony that would destroy him in court. There's more, Pitts continued. Jennifer's already moved assets into offshore accounts controlled by shell companies registered to Blake's previous aliases. By the time she files for divorce, half your liquid wealth will be untouchable. Eugene leaned forward. Martin, they're moving today. Jennifer's scheduled to meet with Tim Ward this afternoon, supposedly to discuss estate planning. She's actually going to present evidence of your money laundering and request immediate asset freezing for her protection. The elegance of their strategy impressed Martin despite his fury. Use his own lawyer against him, create legal complications that would take months to unravel, and disappear with his fortune while he fought federal charges. How much time do we have? Martin asked. Hours, Pitts replied. Once Jennifer meets with Ward, everything accelerates. The FBI will have warrants by tonight. Martin stood and walked to his office window, looking down at the city where he'd built his empire through careful planning and absolute control. Jennifer thought she understood power, the ability to manipulate emotions and exploit trust. She was about to learn about a different kind of power entirely. Eugene, call Nicole. Tell her to implement the backup plan we discussed. All business assets transferred to the emergency trust. All personal accounts moved to international holdings. I want everything legitimate but untouchable within 2 hours. And Jennifer? Eugene asked. Martin's smile was arctic. Jennifer gets exactly what she's been planning for me. Pitts, how quickly can you manufacture evidence of Jennifer's fraud operation? Given what Nicole provided, I can have a complete package ready for federal authorities within 3 hours. Bank records, communication intercepts, testimony from previous victims, everything needed for immediate arrest warrants. Do it, but I want Blake and Jesse taken down first. Jennifer needs to watch her partners disappear before she realizes what's happening to her. At 1:30 p.m., Blake Clark was arrested outside his apartment building on charges of interstate fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. Jesse Moreno was taken into custody simultaneously at his electronics shop, surrounded by evidence of illegal surveillance equipment and fabricated financial documents. Martin watched the arrest through Pitt's surveillance network, noting Blake's panicked attempts to contact Jennifer and his growing hysteria as he realized the scope of the charges against him. At 2 p.m., Jennifer arrived at Tim Ward's law office carrying a briefcase full of fabricated evidence and rehearsed accusations. Ward, previously briefed by Martin, listened to her story with appropriate concern while secretly recording every word. "Mr. Ward, I've discovered that Martin has been laundering money through his construction company for years," Jennifer said, her voice trembling with carefully practiced emotion. "I found these documents hidden in his office safe. I think he's involved with dangerous people." Ward examined the fabricated evidence with professional interest. "Mrs. Porter, these are very serious allegations. If true, you could be in significant danger." "I know. That's why I need immediate legal protection. I want assets frozen until the authorities can investigate. And I think I need to file for divorce. For my safety and the safety of my unborn child." Ward raised an eyebrow. "You're pregnant?" Jennifer's hand moved protectively to her stomach. 6 weeks. Martin doesn't know yet. I'm terrified of how he'll react when he learns the baby might not survive if I'm subjected to stress from his criminal activities." The performance was masterful, a frightened wife protecting both herself and her innocent child from a husband whose success masked dangerous criminal behavior. In any other circumstances, it might have worked perfectly. "Mrs. Porter," Ward said carefully, "before we proceed, there's something you should know. Your husband has been investigating you for several weeks." Jennifer's face went pale. "What do you mean?" Ward slid a thick folder across his desk. "Your real name is Jennifer Lynn Rivera. You and your partner Kelly have been running marriage fraud operations for over 20 years. Mr. Porter has documented evidence of your entire criminal history." Jennifer's mask slipped completely, revealing the cold calculation beneath her practiced vulnerability. "You can't prove anything. Martin's the one with illegal money, illegal activities. Mrs. Rivera, Blake Clark and Jesse Moreno were arrested 2 hours ago. They're already cooperating with federal authorities to avoid life sentences. Your fabricated evidence against Mr. Porter has been identified as part of your fraud operation." Jennifer lunged for her briefcase, but Ward's security team was already moving. Within minutes, she was restrained and waiting for federal marshals who would transport her to the same facility holding Blake and Jesse. Martin arrived as Jennifer was being loaded into the federal transport van. She saw him through the vehicle's window, her face twisted with rage and disbelief. "This isn't over," she screamed. "I'll destroy you. I'll tell everyone what kind of man you really are." Martin approached the van slowly, his face calm and deadly. "Jennifer, you spent 23 years studying me, learning my weaknesses, planning my destruction. But you made one critical error." "What?" she spat. "You assumed I was just another Mark, another lonely, trusting man who could be manipulated and discarded. You never considered that some men are predators by nature, and that you might have finally encountered something more dangerous than yourself." As the van pulled away, Martin felt a profound sense of completion. The betrayal had been devastating, but the response had been perfect, swift, brutal, and absolutely final. Eugene approached from behind. "What about Kelly?" "Arrested in Los Angeles 30 minutes ago." Pitt's federal contacts work very efficiently when properly motivated. Nicole arrived as the last of the federal vehicles departed. "Dad, it's done. All assets protected, all evidence delivered, all loose ends tied up. They'll spend the next 20 years in federal prison, assuming they survive that long." Martin nodded, already planning his next moves. The immediate threat was eliminated, but the deeper work of rebuilding would take time and careful attention. "Nicole, there's one more thing I need you to do. Anything. I want you to contact every one of their previous victims. The ones who lost everything, who had their lives destroyed. I want them to know that Jennifer and Kelly have finally been brought to justice." As they walked back toward Martin's building, he felt lighter than he had in months. The betrayal had nearly destroyed him, but surviving it had revealed depths of strength and ruthlessness he'd never fully accessed before. Jennifer Rivera had tried to play games with a man who viewed games as warfare. She'd lost everything: freedom, identity, future, and would spend decades regretting the day she'd chosen Martin Porter as her final mark. Chapter 7. Aftermath and Reconstruction. 3 months later, Martin stood in his renovated office, watching his construction crews break ground on the largest project in his company's history. The federal investigation had cleared him completely, and the publicity surrounding Jennifer's arrest had paradoxically enhanced his reputation as a man who couldn't be fooled or intimidated. "The Phoenix project is ahead of schedule," Eugene reported, entering with their daily briefing. "The investors are impressed with our security protocols and background check procedures. Martin nodded absently. Since Jennifer's arrest, he'd implemented new systems designed to prevent any future infiltration of his personal or professional life. Every employee, contractor, and potential romantic interest would undergo thorough investigation before gaining access to his inner circle. The divorce had been finalized within 6 weeks, Jennifer's criminal conviction voiding their prenuptial agreement and leaving her with nothing but legal bills and prison uniforms. The baby she'd claimed to be carrying had been revealed as another fabrication, just one more layer of manipulation in her elaborate scheme. Nicole entered carrying a thick folder and wearing the satisfied expression she'd inherited from her father. "Dad, I thought you'd want to see this. It's the final tally of asset recovery from Jennifer's operation." Martin reviewed the documents with professional interest. Federal authorities had recovered over $40 million from various accounts controlled by Jennifer, Kelly, Blake, and Jesse. Most would be returned to previous victims, though legal proceedings would take years to complete. "What about the Rivera sisters themselves?" Martin asked. "Jennifer got 25 years, Kelly got 22. Blake and Jesse each got 15, though Blake's trying to appeal based on claims that he was manipulated by Jennifer." Martin's laugh was devoid of humor. Even in prison, Blake still thinks he was the victim. Eugene knocked on the open door. "Martin, there's someone here to see you. Says it's about Jennifer." The visitor was Katie Watson, the grocery store clerk whose warning had started everything. Now dressed in professional attire, she looked older than her 24 years, carrying herself with the confidence of someone who'd played a crucial role in bringing down dangerous criminals. "Mr. Porter, I wanted to thank you," Katie said after accepting his offer of coffee. "Not just for stopping Jennifer and her crew, but for making sure their previous victims got justice." Martin studied the young woman who'd risked everything to warn a stranger about danger. "You saved my life, Katie. I owe you more than thanks." Katie smiled. "Actually, you've already done more than enough. That college scholarship you established? It's going to change everything for me. I start law school next month." The scholarship had been Martin's idea, a way to ensure that Katie's courage and intelligence weren't wasted stocking grocery shelves. She'd scored in the top 5% on her LSAT and been accepted to Columbia Law School with full funding. "What kind of law?" Martin asked. "Victim advocacy. I want to help people who've been targeted by predators like Jennifer. There are too many people out there who get destroyed by these schemes and never recover." After Katie left, Martin returned to his desk and the daily routine of running an empire that had grown stronger through adversity. The betrayal had nearly destroyed him, but surviving it had revealed capabilities he'd never fully accessed before. His phone buzzed with a text from Reginald Pitts. "Thought you'd want to know. Blake Clark was found dead in his cell this morning. Apparent suicide." Martin felt no satisfaction at the news, only a cold sense of completion. Blake had been weak from the beginning, using charm and manipulation because he lacked the strength for direct confrontation. Prison had simply revealed what he'd always been beneath the surface. Jennifer would be different. She'd survive prison because sociopaths adapted to any environment. But she'd spend every day knowing that her final mark had not only escaped her trap, but had turned her own methods against her with devastating effectiveness. Evening brought the familiar ritual of reviewing contracts and planning future projects. But now Martin worked alone in his house. The silence no longer felt empty. It felt clean, purged of deception and hidden agendas. Nicole arrived for their weekly dinner with Carlos in tow. The prosecutor had become a valuable ally, providing insight into federal investigations and ensuring that Martin's legal protections remained ironclad. "Dad, I have news," Nicole said over dessert. "Carlos and I are getting married. Next month, small ceremony, just family and close friends." Martin smiled genuinely for the first time in months. "Congratulations. Carlos, you're getting an extraordinary woman. Treat her accordingly." "I've learned from watching you, sir," Carlos replied. "Loyalty and trust are earned, not assumed." After they left, Martin walked through his house, noting the absence of Jennifer's belongings and the subtle changes he'd made to reclaim the space. Every room had been cleansed of her presence, redecorated to reflect his preferences rather than her calculated choices. In his study, he opened the safe that Jennifer had thought contained his most valuable secrets. Inside was a single photograph, his late wife Sarah, Nicole's mother, taken on their wedding day 29 years ago. Sarah had died of cancer when Nicole was 12, leaving Martin convinced that true partnership was impossible to find again. Jennifer had exploited that grief, using his memories of genuine love to create the illusion of finding it again. The deception had been perfect because it had targeted his deepest vulnerability. But Sarah's memory had also provided the strength to survive Jennifer's betrayal. Real love left foundations that couldn't be destroyed by imitation, no matter how skillfully crafted. Martin closed the safe and returned to his desk, already planning tomorrow's challenges. His empire would continue growing, his wealth would increase, and his influence would expand. But he'd never again make the mistake of confusing manipulation for affection or calculated attention for genuine care. Jennifer Rivera had taught him that some people were born predators, incapable of authentic human connection. The lesson had been expensive but ultimately valuable. Now he was stronger, wiser, and absolutely ruthless in protecting what mattered most. Anyone who tried to betray him in the future would face consequences that made Jennifer's fate look merciful by comparison. Chapter 8. Justice Served Cold. 6 months after Jennifer's conviction, Martin received an unexpected call from the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Jennifer Rivera had requested a meeting with him, a final conversation before her transfer to a maximum security facility in Colorado. She claims to have information about other fraud operations, the warden explained. Something about a network of female con artists who've been targeting wealthy men across the country. The FBI thinks it might be valuable. Martin agreed to the meeting out of curiosity rather than any desire for closure. Jennifer had lost everything that mattered to her: freedom, money, identity, future, but he suspected she still harbored delusions about manipulating the situation to her advantage. The Federal Detention Center in Lower Manhattan was a fortress of concrete and steel, designed to contain the most dangerous criminals in the country. Martin passed through multiple security checkpoints before reaching the visiting room, where Jennifer waited behind reinforced glass. Prison had transformed her dramatically. The expensive clothes and professional makeup were gone, replaced by an orange jumpsuit and the pale complexion of someone who rarely saw sunlight. But her eyes remained sharp and calculating, still searching for angles and weaknesses to exploit. "Martin," she said through the intercom, her voice carrying none of its former warmth. "Thank you for coming. What do you want, Jennifer?" She leaned forward, apparently attempting to project vulnerability and regret. "I want to help you understand why everything happened the way it did. You deserve the truth." Martin studied her face, noting the practiced expressions and calculated gestures that had once seemed genuine. "The truth is that you're a sociopath who spent 23 years stealing from me while pretending to love me. What else is there to understand?" Jennifer's mask slipped slightly, revealing the cold hatred beneath. "You think you're so much better than me, don't you? So moral and righteous. But you destroyed lives just as thoroughly as I did. I destroyed the lives of people who chose to betray me. You destroyed the lives of innocent people who made the mistake of trusting you. Blake is dead because of you." Jennifer spat. "Jesse's been beaten half to death twice. Kelly's in solitary confinement because other inmates think she's a snitch. You orchestrated all of it." Martin's expression remained impassive. "I provided evidence to federal authorities. What happened to your partners in prison is the natural consequence of their choices." Jennifer laughed bitterly. "Natural consequences? You had Blake killed. Don't pretend otherwise. Blake killed himself because he was weak and couldn't handle the reality of his situation. If I'd wanted him dead, he never would have made it to trial." The conversation continued for 20 minutes, with Jennifer alternating between attempted manipulation and naked hostility. She revealed details about other fraud operations, names of accomplices, and locations of hidden assets, information that would help authorities pursue additional cases. But Martin recognized her true motivation. Jennifer wasn't cooperating out of remorse or desire for justice. She was trying to reduce her sentence and maintain some form of power over her fate. Even facing decades in prison, she couldn't accept that her games were finished. "There's something else you should know," Jennifer said as the visit neared its end. "I wasn't lying about everything. Some of it was real. Nothing about you was real. The first year was real. Before Kelly found us, before we started planning your destruction. For 12 months, I actually cared about you. I thought about leaving the life, starting over, becoming the woman you thought I was." Martin leaned back in his chair. "And what changed your mind?" Jennifer's smile was poisonous. "You did. You were so proud of your success, so confident in your control over everything around you. You treated me like another possession to be displayed and managed. I realized that destroying you would be more satisfying than loving you. So you spent 22 years pretending to be someone else out of spite. I spent 22 years studying you, learning your weaknesses, preparing for the perfect moment to take everything you'd built. It would have worked if that little bitch at the grocery store hadn't interfered. Martin stood to leave. Jennifer, you made one fundamental error in your analysis. You assumed I was weak because I trusted you. But strength isn't the absence of trust. It's the ability to survive betrayal and make your enemies pay for it. This isn't over, Jennifer called as he reached the door. I've got 25 years to plan my next move. People like you always have something to lose. Martin turned back one final time. Jennifer, in 25 years, you'll be 68 years old with no money, no friends, no family, and no future. I'll be 77 with more wealth and power than you can imagine. If you want to spend your remaining years plotting revenge against me, that's your choice. But understand that I'll be watching and I'll be ready. As Martin left the prison, he felt the final traces of emotional connection to Jennifer dissolve completely. She was no longer a person who had shared his life. She was simply another defeated enemy who posed no future threat. The drive back to Manhattan gave him time to process the encounter. Jennifer's revelation about the first year being real was probably another manipulation, but even if true, it changed nothing. She'd chosen deception and betrayal over authentic partnership. The consequences were hers to bear. That evening, Martin met Nicole and Carlos for dinner at an exclusive restaurant overlooking Central Park. The conversation focused on their upcoming wedding, Nicole's law school progress, and Carlos's latest cases. Dad, you seem different, Nicole observed over dessert. More settled, somehow. Martin considered his daughter's words. I think I've finally accepted that some people are irredeemably dangerous. The key is recognizing them before they can do damage. Any regrets? Carlos asked. About destroying Jennifer's operation? None whatsoever. About trusting her initially? It was a necessary education. Now I know what real evil looks like when it's wearing a beautiful mask. After dinner, Martin returned to his house and the quiet satisfaction of a day well executed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new decisions about who deserved his trust and who represented potential threats. Jennifer Rivera was history, a closed chapter in a story that would continue for decades. But the lessons she'd taught him about human nature and the price of betrayal would influence every future relationship and business decision. Some education was expensive but invaluable. Jennifer's had cost him a marriage and nearly destroyed his empire. But surviving her had made him stronger, wiser, and absolutely ruthless in protecting what mattered most. The game was over, and Martin Porter had won completely. Chapter 9, New Beginnings. 1 year after Jennifer's conviction, Martin stood at the altar of St. Patrick's Cathedral, watching his daughter marry Carlos Potts in a ceremony that felt like a celebration of family resilience and loyalty. Nicole radiated happiness as she walked down the aisle, her smile carrying the same determined strength that had helped expose Jennifer's deception. The reception at the Plaza Hotel brought together business associates, federal law enforcement officials, and the kind of carefully vetted guests who understood that loyalty was earned and betrayal was punished. Eugene Doherty served as master of ceremonies, telling stories of Martin's business successes while carefully omitting the darker chapters that had shaped recent years. To Martin Porter, Eugene toasted during dinner, a man who understands that true strength comes from protecting the people who matter most. Martin acknowledged the toast with quiet satisfaction. The past year had been one of rebuilding and strategic expansion. His construction empire had grown by 40%, fueled by investors who respected his ability to identify and eliminate threats before they could cause damage. Katie Watson approached during the reception, now transformed into a confident law student whose first-year grades had placed her at the top of her class. Mr. Porter, I wanted you to know, I've been working with federal authorities to develop new protocols for identifying marriage fraud operations. Your case became the template for recognizing these schemes before they can cause damage. How many other victims have you helped? Martin asked. 17 so far this year. The Rivera network was larger than we initially realized. Jennifer and Kelly were just one cell in a nationwide operation that's been running for decades. Martin felt a grim satisfaction knowing that Jennifer's downfall had saved others from similar destruction. The warning note Katie had passed him in the grocery store had protected far more people than just himself. Later that evening, as the reception wound down, Martin found himself in conversation with Tim Ward, who had become both legal advisor and close friend during the crisis months. "Any word from Jennifer?" Ward asked quietly. "She sends letters occasionally, usually threats or attempts at manipulation. I stopped reading them months ago. What about the appeal?" Martin's smile was arctic. "Denied. Jennifer will serve her full sentence with no possibility of early release." The federal judge was particularly unimpressed with her claims of coercion and reduced culpability. As the evening concluded, Martin drove through Manhattan toward his house, feeling the deep satisfaction that came from surviving betrayal and emerging stronger. The city lights stretched out before him like a conquered territory, full of opportunities for continued expansion and growth. Nicole and Carlos would honeymoon in Europe before returning to build their own legacy of success and integrity. Eugene would continue managing daily operations while Martin focused on strategic planning and new acquisitions. Katie would graduate law school and begin her career protecting vulnerable people from predators like Jennifer. The network of loyalty and trust that Martin had rebuilt was stronger than anything he possessed during his marriage. These relationships were based on mutual respect, shared values, and proven reliability rather than romantic delusion and calculated manipulation. At home, Martin walked through rooms that had been completely transformed since Jennifer's arrest. Her photographs were gone, replaced by pictures of Nicole, Carlos, and trusted business associates. Her furniture had been donated to charity and replaced with pieces that reflected his personal preferences rather than her calculated attempts to project wealth and status. In his study, Martin opened the safe and removed a leather-bound journal he'd been keeping since Jennifer's conviction. The pages contained detailed profiles of every person in his current orbit, their backgrounds, motivations, potential vulnerabilities, and loyalty indicators. Never again would he allow emotional attachment to cloud his judgment about someone's true character. The final entry was dated that morning. Nicole married Carlos today. Their partnership is built on genuine mutual respect and shared values. This is what authentic relationship looks like. No hidden agendas, no calculated deceptions, no secret plans for betrayal. They will succeed because they understand that loyalty creates strength. Martin closed the journal and returned it to the safe alongside Sarah's photograph and important business documents. The past was preserved, but no longer controlling his future. Jennifer Rivera was a contained threat, neutralized permanently, and serving as a warning to anyone else who might consider targeting him. The phone rang with a call from Reginald Pitts, who had transitioned from security consultant to permanent business partner. "Martin, I've got news about that California project. The background checks are complete, all principals cleared, no red flags. We're good to proceed." "Excellent. Send me the final reports tomorrow." After ending the call, Martin poured himself a glass of 25-year-old scotch and settled into his leather chair to review the next day's schedule. A breakfast meeting with potential investors, lunch with Nicole and Carlos before their departure, afternoon sessions with architects on the Phoenix project, evening dinner with Eugene to discuss quarterly projections. Every interaction would be professional, productive, and based on clearly understood mutual benefit rather than romantic fantasy or emotional vulnerability. The lessons Jennifer had taught him about human nature were expensive but invaluable. As midnight approached, Martin felt the deep contentment that came from absolute control over his environment and complete confidence in his ability to identify and neutralize threats before they could cause damage. Jennifer Rivera had tried to destroy him using the most intimate forms of betrayal possible. Instead, she had forged him into something harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous to anyone who might target him in the future. The grocery store note that had started everything now hung framed in his office, a reminder that vigilance was the price of survival and that sometimes salvation came from the most unexpected sources. Martin Porter had won completely. Jennifer Rivera would spend the next 24 years regretting the day she'd chosen him as her final mark. And everyone who mattered to him now understood that loyalty was rewarded while betrayal was punished with absolute finality. The game was over. The predator had become prey, and justice, served cold and calculated, had never tasted sweeter.